So I tell you hit record and then you slam everything around your desk and make noise.
Yes, exactly. That's what I do because, that's what I have to do. It is a good start. It's a great start to a good podcast. I mean, that's...
Like you were warned and you were like, oh, no, you're going to distract us and not talk about the book this week. And then you're immediately shuffling papers and slamming stuff around your desk and not doing anything that has anything to do with the podcast.
No, I was doing a bunch of stuff that had to pertain to the podcast. My whole thing was I asked the question, are we going to actually record this podcast or are we going to talk about everything in the world around the podcast for 50 minutes?
Yes, I've got a fantastic lineup here.
For 50 minutes and then talk about the book.
I've got Carmen Sandiego in the middle.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, she's ready to go. She said the costume is beautiful and the fit is perfect.
Yes.
Now we know where in the world she is.
She doesn't have the hat on. That's not Carmen Sandiego. You're a liar. Liar.
Okay. Well,
liar.
I'm going to break that. I'm going to go into your house. And it's going to get broken.
Can't.
I can.
No, Baba won't let you.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm sure Baba loves that thing.
She does. She can't hear it. It's in the register of noises she can't hear at the moment.
Well, anyway, we're on chapter 2.
Yes.
Of Giant Size X-Men #1.
Number 1. We're chapter 2.
The first appearance of Ilyana Rasputin, which makes this comic very valuable.
Yes.
Uncredited.
Little girl in the field getting about run over by a tractor.
And we had a classic start of a maxi series in the 80s, except this is in the 70s, where the person goes up and gathers all of the heroes to join their team.
Yeah.
But this isn't a maxi series, it's a one-shot.
Yes.
That turns into a really long series.
Yeah, that's a good way to... There's no way to explain it. No.
And they were clearly, like, as we discussed on last week's episode, which came out on New Year's.
New Year's, yes.
Because Deadly Genesis. We get to chapter 2, and it's called And When There Was One, and I assume that's going to be Cyclops.
Maybe. I mean, it sounds like that's a Spice Girls song title, right?
Now, one thing I'll say when editing the podcast for last week, you kept correcting me and saying, like, well, in the future, we know this. And in the future, we know this. Yeah. But we're just reading this book, so I shouldn't pretend like I know anything about what's in the future.
You're right. I was incorrect in saying that we don't know anything about anything.
No, we don't. We have no idea what happens to these characters.
We have no idea. We
have no idea that one of them dies in like 2 issues.
What? That's right.
So I will say this before we get started, not to get us distracted. Before I read this years ago.
Yes.
And I was always, maybe somebody just told me wrong, but I was always under the impression that Thunderbird dies in the first mission, which would be this. So when they say Thunderbird dies in his first mission, are they saying...
The first mission, yeah. I'll be right back.
But anyway, we're back here. Yeah. Is Grandma okay?
Oh, yeah. No, she wanted me to turn on some lights downstairs because if I didn't do it, then she would have gone downstairs and did it, and then you would have heard the stair machine in the background and the dogs barking because they would have thought that she was going downstairs and would have fed them again, and it would have been a whole production.
Okay, well, we're back here, and we've got some stairs. We've got Wolverine at the top of the stairs with his arms folded, just looking down at everybody like they're idiots.
Yeah.
We've got Sunfire with his fish mask on.
Yes.
Yeah, I've never gotten the Sunfire mask either.
It's just like if we're talking about, I already said my piece last episode about.
Well, you don't like the overall costume.
I don't like the overall.
I'm backing the mask specifically.
Honestly, I don't understand the mask itself either. It's all just it's a mess.
I'll have to research this one. I don't think the mask, like Tiger Mask and stuff, that was big in Japan in the 80s, right? That didn't in pro wrestling. That wasn't around in like 74, right?
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean,
they might have been.
did do a lot of like kaiju stuff, like, you know, not kaiju, but like the Ultraman and other things like that. But it's not even on.
It could be
on
sort
that.
of Ultraman.
But there was a movie called Zebra Man about a superhero that was a zebra. He had a zebra mask, and it's kind of like a tiger mask. But
so pro wrestling had the stuff after that, which makes sense because pro wrestling always is behind pop culture by like 10 years.
Yeah. But Zebra Man was a parody of superhero stuff, so it was based off of probably Tiger Man type thing. So, anyways, I
do appreciate how they do make. He tries to make a Banshee look older than the rest of them.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah,
and we can't see Sunfire's face because he may look older too. But
I think they're around the same age technically.
And that's probably why they're hanging out together.
And they've worked together. They worked in the previous incarnations of the X-Men when they've done things together in the past. They've worked together. So.
And we don't know anything about Wolverine, right? He's made like 2 or 3 appearances.
Yeah, at this point, he's the dark horse, if you will.
And then we've got Happy Colossus, who is gigantic.
Yeah. And
he's showing some skin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Storm, of course, has the really cool costume, and she says she has a beautiful costume. And we find out their costumes are made of unstable molecules, which adjust themselves where necessary.
Mm-hmm.
So that's good to know. I the interesting phrasing. It's also how they explain away Dave Cockrum's costumes working in the real world.
Right.
And it sort of explains away, too, some other things, right, that we don't have to explain later, like why does Nightcrawler's costume go with him when he
teleports, yeah.
Doesn't really make sense. But, okay. So, no tail, though, right now.
At this point, no, we don't see it. It's tucked up. It's inside.
Yes, yeah.
He's holding it inside. His tail has not poked out.
And we've got some interesting, you do have some things that start to tell you a little bit about the characters here. One of the, of course, reasons to like Cockrum's drawing. You pointed out already, Sunfire and Banshee are talking as if they're old friends.
Yeah.
Wolverine is standoffish with his arms crossed. Colossus very open pose, happy, excited. Yeah. Aurora very much taking center stage.
But she's got that openness in her stance too, right? Yeah. And all.
We've got James messed it up. James. I'm going to mess it up. Proud Star. His hands on his hips.
Oh, yeah.
Now I just messed up with who's who, which one's his brother and which one's him.
He's taking that power stance right there. Boom, in the middle, front and center, next to Aurora.
Yeah, and Nightcrawler's sort of in the background, just chilling out.
Yeah.
In the Spider-Man pose.
Yep.
And so that's where we have the team, and they're here, and they are ready to mission, I think.
Ready to mission.
But first they have to find out what's going on, and Sunfire, of course, jumps down from the stairs, apparently. Starts yelling at Professor X immediately. He's like, why'd you drag me here? I don't know what's going on. And then he's like, here's everybody's favorite X-Man Cyclops, Scott Summers. And we're not supposed to talk about the future, right? I hate Cyclops.
You hate Cyclops? Why? Why do you hate him?
I hate Cyclops so much. Are we talking about the future or are we not?
I mean, you can if you want to, but...
It's probably mostly Grant Morrison's fault.
Is it just because... of all the meme I sent you?
He's just I know it's more of my response to the meme. He's just an asshole.
Yeah.
I guess you were saying in the original X-Men, Beast was sort of the asshole.
Well, Scott Summers, they put him in a position in which he's not necessarily, he's a leader because he's kind of like one of the older kids at the school. So him and Angel are like at that age where they're both like the older kids, but it comes down to like Scott's more like, I want to say tactical in a sense. He's got a mind for things and the ability to act on those things, and that's why Professor X puts him into more of a power position where Angel's like, he's just always, before he sprouts his wings, he's always been in a world where he can just because he's rich, right? So he's always had all that at his fingertips. So
yeah, I hate the Starjammers.
So you don't like Starjammers?
No, I hated the Grant Morrison sleeping with the White Queen and his, it was just, they should have, unpopular opinion, or maybe popular opinion, they should have killed Scott Summers during the Dark Phoenix saga.
Yeah, well, I mean,
the character wasn't needed anymore at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And then they hold on to this character for years they don't really need.
Yeah, I mean, they could have evaporated him and moved forward and told a whole entire Jean Grey as she rises from the ashes as the Phoenix, but
has to deal with the repercussions of what's happened, right?
Yeah.
Without Scott, right?
Without Scott, and yeah, I mean, but I hate to say it, I don't think we as a society were ready for that. At least the comic reading society was not ready. The main populace buying and reading comics at that time was not ready for that.
Well, they weren't ready for any of the X-Men. The book had been canceled for 2 years.
Yeah, but I don't think the market that they were going for, trying to recapture, wasn't going to buy that book.
Well, they could have just got rid of Jean, too, and just focused on the new X-Men, too. I mean, that's what they were attempting to do.
They end up doing that like 3 years later.
Yeah, so. They end up doing that anyway, right?
Yeah.
So it's, I mean, it's just, he's just, I mean, he's introducing himself here.
Yeah.
It's just not, he's just, yeah, you're right. He's like the principal's or the teacher's pet, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And Wolverine, and you do get the interplay between him and Wolverine through history, which of course we don't know here yet. But I've always hated the character. I hate the character.
You're like, I don't like him. Well,
and this book doesn't help me like so even when I read it later, right? Like after I'd read those other books, and so I'm tainted by my opinion, right, already. But this book did not make me like him.
Did you just wish you could become part of the Black Dragon Society and learn from Count Dante so you could go fight him?
No.
Oh.
I wish he died.
Oh, that's terrible, man.
Well, we get and he's just a tool. Like anyway. Let's not ruin the story.
Not really. We can have Scott banter at some other point.
Yeah, well, there'll be some more Scott banter as we go through this book. So anyway, Scott comes out and he's like, "Yeah, I lost all of my friends," and then we get an ad for Charles Atlas and some rocket cars and the deadliest man alive, the Black Dragon Fighting Society, which you were already talking about.
I jumped it. I was like, oh yeah, he lost all his friends, and then we get all that.
We get some exposition for something that's never happened, so that's good. I guess it's good they're telling us.
What do you mean something that's never happened? It happened.
We don't know it happened, so.
Well, you do know it happened if you read the books before, Dan.
Well, we didn't read. We're just now finding out. So Scott
my gosh,
and we've got a lineup of. Apparently, this is the last lineup without the Beast, right? So we've got Havoc, who is Scott's younger brother. Yeah. Lorna Dane, or Polaris, who is
Iceman.
Just a character they always fucked up through time. She could have been awesome. I always loved Polaris. I thought Polaris was a cool concept. But Lorna Dane at the time, right, at this moment, they're not calling her Polaris. She goes back and forth with a code name and without a code name. We've got Angel, Jean Grey, sometimes known as Marvel Girl, and Iceman. And they go off to an island called Krakoa in the South Pacific. And it's supposedly has the most powerful mutant in the world on the island.
On the island.
And they go in the Stratojet, which must be the precursor for Blackbird.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll give you the rundown really fast. So they had this is like the in between. They had a different jet. It got messed up by Magneto. This ended up being what was getting built by Beast before he took off, and then they end up getting Blackbird from Beast later. But they they had let's see. So they in their previous fights, they're like, oh, we gotta go build our mutant team up. We need to go collect more mutants for the school. And they go and find the strongest mutant signal through Professor X, and they go to Krakatoa.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. They go here.
Uh-huh.
So this book is released in 73, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, 74, but released in 73, cover date 74.
Right.
And it's interesting. So are you aware, and I said I would bring this up last time,
yes,
what happened in Doom Patrol number 121, released in 1968?
The same story.
Yes. Well, it says it's the beginning of the end for the Doom Patrol, but the beginning of the end, Madame Rouge embarks upon an ambitious plot to avenge herself against the Doom Patrol, though she decides to send the Doom Patrol a message by destroying her old colleagues, the Brotherhood of Evil. Editor Murray Boltonoff and artist Bruno Primeri appeared in the Doom Patrol's last issue, urged readers that the team's fate was in their hands. Only a miracle could save the Doom Patrol. With the Doom Patrol's powers neutralized on a Caribbean island, the Brotherhood of Evil member Madame Rouge and Nazi Captain Zal demanded that the team choose between saving their own lives or those of the 14 innocent residents that form the population of Codsville, Maine. In unison, the heroes told the enemies to fire away at them. One explosion later, the Doom Patrol was no more. I need to bring that up, right? Because the X-Men analog that DC put out, right, died on an island, sacrificed themselves for others. Here we go. I mean, 6 years later.
I mean, technically, this is like the second time that the X-Men have died on, lost themselves on an island because they went to go fight on an island that Magneto had taken over prior. And how they end up with their numbers wavering because they go to this island to go fight Magneto, and prior to this situation, and they find that Magneto's taken over the whole entire island of people, and they're like, oh no, we have to fight and destroy all this stuff, or destroy Magneto and his.
Was it called Cooey Cooey Cooey?
No,
that's unfortunate.
I know.
That would have been a hell of an adventure if Blue Beetle and Booster Gold showed up to fight Magneto, and then
a lot of islands. It would have been cool.
Well, in Genosha, right? I mean,
it was Genosha.
Genosha appears.
They end up in Genosha multiple times, and the Genoshians hate the mutants over and over and over again.
Yeah.
For everything, and it's not even they hate the wrong mutants for the right reasons, or the wrong mutants for the right reasons. They just hate mutants because of everything.
Well, on this island, Krakoa, but it is interesting to point out the similarities between the end of the Doom Patrol and the start of the new X-Men.
100%.
Because DC later relaunches Doom Patrol as well with a whole new cast. And the folks were basically gone, right? Except Robot Man. So very kind of similar. There's some similar things, though obviously I'm not going to say that the Doom Patrol was anywhere close to the popularity of the X-Men. But it's sort of interesting, some of the parallels.
Yeah.
We find out that everybody's captured almost immediately. Well, we don't know what happens to them, actually. Everybody disappears except Scott on the island.
Yeah.
He wakes up and his powers have stopped working.
Yeah.
They send him. He flies back home. No, he gets in the plane and it flies him home. Yeah.
Yeah, it's got autopilot and takes him home.
And then he ends up with a very Lex Luthor looking
Professor X.
Professor X. He's got the Lex Luthor eyebrows going, and some pretty cool facial work by Cockrum here.
Oh yeah, no, the pages are great. The detail, the anguish you're seeing in all of Scott's panels leading up to his ocular blast and everything like that is just fantastic.
And he goes between he has the 5-panel grids working, then he goes to a 9-panel grid, then he goes to a variation of the 5-panel. So and then he gets to 9-panel grids. A lot of I really like how Cockrum here will vary the panel sizes as he needs them, right? Depending on what he needs to tell in the story and how many characters he needs to integrate in the story. And probably good that he worked on Legion first, which has a billion characters, right? But then, kind of building in the storytelling. I guess the big part here is Scott gets back to Professor X and his powers come back on more powerful than ever before.
Mm-hmm.
And
more powerful. And
he says, "Hey, everyone, come help my friends." And Sunfire, more reasons why I don't like him, is like, "Fuck you. I'm not going to help you."
He's like, I didn't sign up for this. It sounds like a death trip, like death vacation. I'm not going home. And I'm not going with you guys. I'm going home.
So they take off, but then like 3 panels later, Sunfire flies back. He's like, "I want to go too.
Let me come." And what's crazy is you look at that when with this view of the aircraft they're in, for folks that are like, "Oh, hey, what does it look like?" And you don't get an opportunity to take a look at this amazing comic book. Have you ever seen the TV show Buck Rogers? Doesn't it look like his when he doesn't have a space shuttle anymore, but he's flying in the future?
It does.
It does.
I would also say too. Why'd you go pick up the worst character from Buck Rogers? And
because it's the only one I can do.
That's fair. So what I like here, though, too, is I don't want to downplay Len Wein's dialogue because we've been going through the story. And if I don't go through the story, we're never going to get it done.
Yeah.
As you've pointed out many times to the listeners, like I'm the one holding up the story. It's definitely me. Like I'm the only one talking about other things than the book. But as we go through the story, we start to build the dialogue that differentiates this group from the old group, right? So we get Banshee in the background. He's like, "It seems like I had my first," or no, Storm says, sorry, not Banshee. Banshee's just looking off into the sky. Storm says, "It seems like I've had my first taste of mutant camaraderie, and I must say, Cyclops, I did not like it." And Thunderbird says, "Maybe you didn't notice, sister, but this group ain't exactly a mutual admiration society." And I think they're starting to they're attempting to differentiate this new group from the old group, right? And make sure that you, the reader, know this isn't going to be the same old X-Men book. Like you're going to get something different.
Like the old X-Men was a group of classmates that became friends. Like it's when you think about it, and this is the thing that you think about as you become an adult. When you're a kid, it's so easy to make friends because you have to go to school with people and you're thrown into these situations where you become friends. And as an adult, it's like, well, you find common interests with people, but it's like, how do you make friends and stuff like that? And it's like, do you become friends with the people you work with, or do you become friends with these people that you meet in the world and stuff like that? It's just so difficult because of whatever. And these people are like, they're in that coworker stage. They're like, well, we're not exactly friends, but we are similar. But when we're doing this thing, but we're coworkers, and we're just kind of like, well, I guess we got to get along. I mean, we will see some bonds get formed and some friendships form through this, but it's not right off the bat for sure.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting too. I think there's, again, we talk about, I don't think Len Wein gets enough credit for the start of the X-Men, right? I don't, because he's gone as editor so soon, right?
Yeah.
And then, but there's some interesting tie-ins, right? Because the formula certainly gets used over and over again throughout history, right?
Yeah.
Len Wein's the editor for this, and I said it came out in 73. It's 74, so covered it in May 75. Right. And Len Wein's not long for the editor chair. We're going through like the cycle of Marvel editors, and he's over at DC in 77 doing Batman in Detective. then Marv Wolfman takes over the editor chair for a hot minute because they're just cycling through editors. But, when Marv goes over to DC, he takes all of what he learned here and applies it to the new Teen Titans, right? I mean, the exact same formula, right? Hey, the one difference is he doesn't just kill the old team necessarily, but it's the same formula, right? Like bring in a couple of existing characters, keep Wonder Girl, keep Robin, keep Kid Flash, but then introduce Starfire and Raven and Cyclops and Cyborg, right? So, and that becomes the most popular book over at DC, right? So we get sort of the same sort of formula. It's like this all new, all different. And it's always interesting to me because New Teen Titans, right? And Uncanny, right? The new books, right? You get the new, but then that's tried later. And now when you see new on a comic, it's almost like poison.
Why is this thing on there? Oh, I hate it so much. New.
It's like they have to tell you it's the all new, all different, and you're like, oh great, a bold new direction. I've heard that one before. But this works, and I think obviously with people replicating it, right, that hurts the viability of it down the line.
Right.
But it is copied a couple times, and it is effective. And I think a lot of it is because of the very rapid way Len Wein and then Chris Claremont with Cockrum are able to build the characters and really differentiate them from the original X-Men.
Yeah.
It's a transition from Silver Age to Bronze Age.
Mm-hmm.
And they were able to successfully do that with the New Teen Titans as well, or Marv Wolfman was. With George Perez, I'm sure the George Perez art had nothing to do with it.
No, nothing at all.
Again, put good writing with good art, and
it sells books. That's for sure.
So now we get Chapter 3.
Chapter 3,
Assault Force.
Assault Force.
Assault Force. That's more of Cockrum's Legion costumes, I think, than the X-Men costumes.
Well, I thought because it's being led by Scott Summers, it's just
Asshole Force.
Yes.
Or did you think Nightwing had come over and then it was just Ass Force?
He's just shaking the booty. He's just, hey, everybody, stop, because I'm about to drop and serve.
So we finally get Wolverine saying something. He says, "Can't say much for your taste in vacation, Scott Summers." So he starts to get Wolverine already sassing Scott Summers in his very first mission with the team, which is perfect.
It's perfect. See, it is Ass Force. It's like Scott Summers and Wolverine just being ass.
Well, and they're all just pissing on Scott Summers, right?
Oh yeah, no, all it started 2 panels back. Pages back. Everybody's just giving him a tough time.
And it's like, I can't say much for your sense of humor, Wolverine, nor yours, Thunderbird. And he's like, my name's Proud Star, One Eye. And then they're just all attacking Cyclops, which is great. Love that. And that's one thing too I was going to ask you about, right, in reading this. That part, we are getting the character differentiation, but that doesn't seem different from the original X-Men book, right, with the teenagers fighting all the time.
Oh yeah. No, they fought all the time. Now it's just like workplace hazing.
And
snarky
Scott breaks them up into teams. So we've got some teams that don't make any sense, but I guess they sort of make sense. We get Sunfire and Nightcrawler together. So we've got the spy and the aerial
acrobat
weapon.
Yeah.
Okay. We get Banshee and Wolverine.
Yeah.
And Wolverine's whining about and Banshee, by the way, is very subtle as he goes into places. Nobody will ever notice that Banshee's coming in.
Nope. Not at all. He does. He sneaks into places, super, super quiet and chill.
Very quiet.
Yeah, it's like a fart in a satin sheet.
Yeah, I guess it makes sense to put Wolverine with him if anything goes wrong. Wolverine will just go in there and start clawing stuff.
Snake.
We've got Colossus and Storm. So it always too made sense to put the two least experienced people together.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Let's put the two least experienced people together. And again, like two essentially like dynamos in their own rights.
Right. But also the least experienced. Like, don't put the least experienced people with the more experienced people. That's
no.
Like, I think if I was scrambling this team, this just shows how inept Cyclops is the leader, right? Like, you would at least put, like, probably Wolverine with Storm maybe, or Cyclops, right?
Yeah.
And then, anyway, we get 3-dimensional Marvel superhero action scenes. Collect them all.
Collect them all.
Just $3.29. Can we buy those still? Do you think? Offer expires December 31st, 1975. So that's a big negative. You can also sell the grit.
The grit. Cool. The grift? Missing a letter.
Like, is that the creepiest looking kid ever?
It is. It's missing a letter though. It's missing the F, the grift.
Yeah. Well, anyway, and then we get Thunderbird has to go with Cyclops because he drew the short straw for sure.
Right.
What are they insinuating about Thunderbird through this? Like, it's like they send everybody else off by themselves, and we get sort of a highlight on Thunderbird, but they're going to kill him. Like, what, 3 or 4 issues later, right?
Well, I mean, he's a wild card.
I'm seriously asking though. Why are we highlighting this character that they know they were going to kill?
Well, I don't think they knew they were going to kill him.
You don't think they knew? Okay, so maybe Claremont takes over and doesn't like the character. Is that
maybe? I don't know. I honestly reading when my first read through of this. And yes, we're spoiling it for you people. When I was younger, I was like, oh man, this guy, he's like, because you think of him and Wolverine are equally matched in the sense of they're those two wild card type of, guys. And maybe it was one of those things like, what do the readers like? Who do the readers like more? Is it this character or is it this character? And, do we push Wolverine out into his own book, or do we keep this guy, or do we keep one or give her to the other?
Or is it just from the two very racist panels at the bottom of this page? Cyclops and Greg is on the warpath.
I'm on the warpath, just like Thunderbird.
I was going to say like Warpath.
Warpath. That
was his brother's code name.
Well, I'm not. I'm talking the character we're talking about.
You're shot at me. You're like, who's Warpath?
No, I'm just like, you're jumping ahead in stuff I don't know about right now because you told me to forget about my future knowledge and only know about my past of past.
Okay. So I meant that when we were analyzing the book, not when we were telling jokes.
I don't know what a joke is, Dan. I'm super serious now.
You are so super serious. So serious you're gonna like make your chair make noise in like 2 seconds. So anyway, we get Cyclops and the most experienced person with Thunderbird, and the jet disappears and they immediately get captured.
It's gone.
Yeah, well, they get attacked by a plant.
You could say that it's a plant.
How come this time he has his powers, but last time he's on the island he doesn't?
I don't know. That's a good question. Also, you would think that because he's been on the island before, he would know what to expect.
No, he just got knocked out immediately. Like that's
you would imagine he would have seen it coming, but then again, he's a Cyclops, so he can't see everything.
Well, they have a battle with the plant monster, and then inexplicably there's dialogue that says 14 minutes later, which seems quite specific for a comic book.
14 minutes later. Man, that's a long-ass fight for a plant.
Yeah, well, they've arrived at a giant palace-looking thing, and you can get all 18 Marvel Hero stick-ons for only $250.
That's a good deal. I want to stick them on everything. I wonder if you can put them on a car. And you become a motorcycle
mechanic. You can play guitar in 7 days.
You can join
Cobra Kai.
Oh, sweet. Could I grow an impressive beard or mustache? Oh.
No, everybody saw your impressive beard on the Christmas present opening.
I have it just cut down to a really nice mustache, and I got called sir today in the office. Excuse me.
Well,
sir.
there you go. See. Well, we get to the north side of the island with Storm and Cyclops, and an avalanche happens, and
they win. Because just like in the Wonder Woman book, Peter takes a tree and just beats the bejesus out of the rocks.
There's nothing in this book that is like the Wonder Woman book, to be clear.
That's true. There's nothing at all.
We're specifically referring to the Wonder Woman story in the Christmas with the Superheroes tabloid that we reviewed. The very disturbing Wonder Woman story, which I'm shocked that you're bringing up again.
It's just that Peter takes a tree and just like plays baseball with the rocks. He's just like.
That's true. Well, Wolverine and Banshee lay waste to some giant lobsters.
Lagosta. Yeah, it's like they're gonna maybe they're crabs. They're gonna make some crab cakes.
I don't know. I mean, they win pretty quickly. I mean, one has claws and one can like blow up the shells with his voice. So I mean, it was a pretty easy victory there. And then we've got the weakest of the combinations here. We've got the teleporter mixed with the guy who fires death rays from his hands, and they get attacked by the birds from
Harry Potter.
No, that's not where I was going, but that's fine.
It looks like
No, I was going to say like from the birds, like from Hitchcock, but if we're going to Harry Potter, that's like not fine, but that's fine. Anyway, they dispatch these birds very quickly, making the rest of the X-Men look fairly pathetic to get captured in like 1 second. So the new X-Men take out everything, and they go to a giant temple, and they blast it open with their superpowers all at the same time. And all of the old X-Men are in some tree roots.
There.
Or roots?
Yeah, root down.
It's like a Thomas Dish novel.
It's scary.
Do you know that Thomas Dish novel?
I don't know that Thomas Dish novel. Where they get tied up in the roots.
Well, I'm actually trying to remember the title of the novel, but
it just brought up a bunch of plates. This like my other podcast, Plates and Trains. So if you're interested in plates and trains, then we talk about HO scale trains and decorative plates. It's a really good podcast.
Well,
it's like, what the hell?
I'm looking up something else right now, and I don't know what you're talking about. I have no idea what you're talking about.
When you looked up the stuff because it showed up on the screen, it was nothing but you put in Thomas Dish, and it just brought up a bunch of plates, decorative plates.
Well, now I've quit sharing my screen, so you'd stop distracting people. But the book's called The Genocides, and the world cities have been reduced to cinder and ash because alien plants have taken over the Earth.
Oh.
And humanity lives like underneath these plants and has to like try to figure out how to survive.
That makes sense.
That's what the thing reminded me of. It does not have good ratings, this book, but I liked it. So anyway, they're all captured, and we find out very quickly that the island trapped them all.
No.
And they are all calling Cyclops a moron for coming back. So, I mean, basically we have a theme here. The new X-Men hate Cyclops. The old X-Men hate Cyclops.
Cyclops just never... He's not liked.
No, and for good reason. So, and then the island comes to life. That's why I thought it was Cooey, Cooey, Cooey. And we get to Chapter 4, Krakoa, the island that walks like a man.
Wow. It looks like...
You're going to do the Frankie Valli, right?
Walks like a man.
No, you can't do it. Okay, you can stop now. Okay, so the images.
Thanks, Dan.
You're
Walks
welcome.
like a Dan.
You're not even in the right register. So
I'm not. I can't sing, dude. I haven't sung since like 8th grade.
Well, I don't have falsetto anymore. Thank you, COVID. So I can't do it. So the sunburst brilliance of anyway, the island was tested, had atomic testing done on it, and it became a mutant itself.
Whoa.
And it grew hungrier, and it wanted to eat mutants, and so it lured the X-Men there, and it captured them very quickly. and you could get paid $50 for a penny. So it's exciting.
That's pretty cool.
Basically, we get this dialogue of the MacGuffin, right? Like explaining everything it was doing.
I was collecting you.
Yeah, and now it's time for him to feed and
eat you.
Yeah, basically, like all of the mutants gather together, use their powers to beat up the island.
Except they need one mutant more than all the rest.
And so, of course, Professor X comes in and he says, Scott, stop. You're going about this all wrong. Shock of shocks.
Oh.
You know, you'd think if he constantly goes about it all wrong, the professor would quit putting him in the field as his, like, field commander.
Right. You would think. Well, eventually, yes.
He says, I've been mentally monitoring your battle thus far, studying this living island, and I believe I've discovered a weak point. Now, this is my plan. So what you do is all you have to do is put it to sleep. So you just have to give it a command, and all the Borg go to sleep.
Oh, okay. Shut down.
And then that's the end.
Control-Delete.
Yeah.
Control-Delete.
Yeah, so why doesn't he just put the island to sleep with his gigantic mental powers?
Because he's not on the island?
Well, he contacted Scott from halfway around the world, but now he's tired.
Yeah, so, he's tired. He's an old
why didn't
man.
you just put the island to sleep instead of talking to Scott? Like, having Scott help him?
That's a good question. That's a very
well,
good...
anyway, it is a good question. Storm and Lorna Dane work together.
Yeah.
And they create an electromagnetic storm. And Havoc's all freaking out because he thinks Polaris will be killed because... How many times did they do that storyline over time?
Well, this time might be the last time because she
How
might
much more
die.
Powerful is she than Havoc?
She's like a ton more powerful, but he might lose his girlfriend.
Yeah.
I mean...
So, who do you hate more?
Who?
Except when he's in X Factor written by Larry David. Or Peter David, sorry. Larry David? Wow, that would be an interesting book.
That would be such a crazy book. That would be awesome. Yeah, okay.
Except when he's in X Factor written by Peter David and running the detective agency. Who do you hate more, Cyclops or Havoc?
So do I mean, they're both, the thing is like they're
bros.
They're bros. They're brothers that share a very similar kind of, I want to say their mentality is very similar in a sense, right? Although, like Havoc's younger, and then Havoc also has a belief that, like, Scott's a little jaded. Havoc has this like belief that things can change, things can get better, but then again, he has parents that are like, as soon as they find out he's a mutant, they're like, get the F out. So it's like, wait a minute, you're shooting power out of your body? What's wrong with you?
Yeah, I don't know.
You're the one who blew up the plane with your original dad in it? It's your fault.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, anyway, we get
sorry.
The Professor. Well, no, I did ask. Professor X.
They're both bad. I don't know who. I would toss a coin.
At least they do cool things with Havoc later.
Havoc, I think Havoc's probably. I mean, like he's a little bit better. He's more of an optimist. Scott's more of a pessimist.
Well, the professor collapses as usual because he's pretty much worthless until he turns evil and collapses the universe in on itself. Oh. And spoiler. So it's and
he just does bad things every 5 books. It's okay.
Yeah, and then the island gets rained on and it's really happy because it got some rain. But then Havoc and Cyclops shoot the island. Now, I'm just hypothetically saying, if you needed mental powers, don't they have like a really powerful telepath / telekinetic on the island already that could probably do things?
Yeah, they do.
Maybe that's why she goes crazy and murders people, because nobody respects her powers.
Well, you got to think about this too, and this is part of the reason why Beast left and why some of the other X-Men kind of left and are a little upset is maybe she didn't want to remember certain things, so she told Professor X to put a little block in there as to why certain things aren't, and that's why she doesn't know certain things, because maybe he took away certain aspects of her thought process.
That's fair.
And then he also keeps going in there and tweaking a little bit here and a little bit there, and that's why Beast is like, if he does that to her, how much does he do to the rest of us, and how much does he sway the rest of our opinions?
And then she heard a rumor.
And then she heard it. Well, I mean, that's funny, but then that is not too far off from the truth.
Well, I know. I mean, that whole series is an analog to this. So
yeah.
But anyway, they beat up the island, and it's collapsing.
They beat it up and they throw it into they kick it out of the ocean.
And the old X-Men are still fighting with each other all through this.
Mm-hmm.
Like now Havoc's fighting with Iceman over who gets to carry Lorna off the island. Like it's just like they are insufferable.
Right.
And I guess good on Len Wein. If you were getting us to hate the old ones and like the new ones, you are doing a fantastic job.
Oh yeah.
Except getting us to like Thunderbird.
Well,
like, because they're going to kill him in like 2 issues. But yeah. So spoiler. So anyway, we get. I guess that's one we should know about too, right? Like I said, we shouldn't think forward, but I am thinking, like, honestly, of the whole group, right? The 2 unlikable ones are Sunfire and Thunderbird, right?
Yeah, and Sunfire leaves. I mean, except depending if we're gonna read more or not later, but I mean, Sunfire.
Well, we might read some more, but not immediately.
It's not gonna. This doesn't really. It's not spoiling the story. It just puts it out there. I mean, he leaves because he was gonna leave to begin with, and we have a very strong-willed X-Men in Thunderbird.
Yeah, who's not interesting in playing along with the team.
He's not. Yeah, he's been doing his own thing for quite some time.
Kind of like, yeah. And so kind of like Wolverine. So you don't need both of them, I think, is kind of what you were saying before, too.
Yeah.
And you honestly don't. You only need one. And I'll just, I hadn't thought about it from the Sunfire perspective, but you really do only need one of the 3 of them, right? Like you don't need a Wolverine and a Sunfire and a Thunderbird. You need one.
Yeah, you only need one, and it really comes down to who do the readers align with. Which one to, like you put all 3 of them in, all 3 hotheads, and I mean, I'm pretty sure they didn't ask the readers which ones they liked, but at one, you start to see them kind of whittle down. Sunfire leaves, Proudstar perishes, and then you're left with Wolverine butting heads with everybody and being Wolverine.
Well, and then, they defeat the island, and then they are all done. They beat up the island by working together, theoretically.
Yay.
And then they're all happy at the end. They've survived.
They throw the island into
space. And Angel says, sorry, we don't have seats for all of you, but this plane wasn't designed to carry so many mutants. And then he's like, what do we do? What are we going to do with 13 X-Men? It's like, and he said, we'll find out when the Doomsmith strikes next issue. So, I mean, a good bridge. Yeah, I was just thinking, too, like, you ask, like, who likes which character we like the most, right? Of the 3, Wolverine has, like, 1 line.
Yeah.
So Wolverine they didn't write him to be hated.
They didn't write him to be hated, but they wrote him to be, he's just like he's the loner in the corner. And you already, like, so you set him up for that. You already know Sunfire is this guy that has worked with the X-Men, but he's already got his own thing going on in Japan. But you also know that he doesn't really want to be part of the X-Men. He said that numerous times in the past as well.
Well, and just think how well those Sunfire movies would have sold. It would have been amazing. Like just #1 hits. I
mean, redesign and maybe bring some other stuff in. Who knows? But
so Wolverine had lines. Wolverine only had lines on the page where he was fighting with Sunfire. the page where he leaves with Professor X, the 2 pages there, and then the one line to Scott, and that's it in the whole book.
Wow.
In reading this multiple times, because, we're drilling down into the book, right? Like, I hadn't ever thought about that. Like, I was like, Wolverine really doesn't talk in this whole thing. No. And then they make him awesome when he just, like, takes out the giant lobsters.
Yeah.
And he goes back to not talking. Mm-hmm. And they really rely on the older X-Men to be just the whiny group that they were before. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And there are some other, I didn't read them. I guess you've read them before. I didn't read the reprint stories in here. So
they're just like a kind of like a quick, like, get to know these people.
Get to know the older. Yeah.
Yeah. The X Family album, get to know who these people are, it's Scott. These are his powers. This is what he does. This is Iceman. This is what he does. So if you're not familiar with these uncanny characters,
These uncanny characters.
Yes.
Well, and I'll just say, too, this podcast has an interesting feel to it because we got interrupted a couple of times. So just bear with us. But I do want to circle back around, right? Like, I mean, obviously, last episode became the tribute to Dave Cockrum on accident, which is what I titled the episode.
Yeah.
Now we're here with Len Wein creating the X-Men, right, with Cockrum. I mean, why did this work?
Why did it work?
Yeah.
I think because you have a idea generator creating this new kickoff story with new X-Men characters, and you have an artist that's got character designs that are appealing to people, that draw attention to these new characters that are being created with these new designs, and they marry up really nice. Page layouts, like you talked about, looked really good. A lot of really good use of panel and flow, so that's really appealing and nice, where in previous books it's very standard, very I want to say, like, pop, okay, here's your 5-panel page, 5-panel page, 4-panel page, 1 splash page. And on this, it's like you're getting all this crazy action dialogue crammed into things. Just it's very, very interesting. Very, very. It doesn't feel like the X-Men that we're used to because of the way that it's designed.
Yeah,
and
I'm with you.
And the way that it flows, writing wise, it doesn't even sound like. Because these new characters have different voices, or they don't use their voices, as we talked about with Wolverine. You got a very quiet character, where all the other characters in the past were fighting for word bubbles.
Spotlight,
and Spotlight in the previous lineups and stuff like that, and because they're all brooding teenagers, in the previous character lineup. In this one, you've got a bunch of adults who they kind of know who they are, but they also they're so used to either standing back and being the different person and not standing in they know they're different, like Wolverine, and he's like, hey, these are the things that I'm good at, and this is what I'm not good at, and it's talking to people.
Well, and the two-page spread where the island is retreating or is defeated. Yeah. Looks like the apocalypse is happening, and no pun intended.
Right.
Not the character, the actual and there's whirlpools, and it looks like an action movie. Like, the art is crazy. Like, I didn't even want to try to describe it during the podcast. Right? There's no amount of words I could use to describe it, that sequence, and then it ends, and then we have the funny line, right, as they take off. I guess, what are we gonna do with all of us? Haha. Yeah. But it's
some of them fly.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, I think that's what, you look at that art and you're like, I want more of that. Right.
Yeah.
And I think people come back for that, and then they stayed for a long time. And for whatever reason too. Yeah. I think enough for whatever reason, but we mentioned the transition from the Silver Age to the Bronze Age, right? Like, you have it's a different set of characters to appeal to a different, generation of reader, right?
Yeah.
This isn't
not your dad's X-Men.
Well, it's not teenagers from, it's one where they actually had to evolve, right? It's no longer teenagers from the 60s, it's adults from the 70s, and we're going to put them in a book, right? The only one that is Kurt might be a teenager, right? But the only one that's clearly a teenager is Peter, right?
Yeah. Peter is a teenager, but he looks like a man.
Storm might be.
No.
Kurt might be, but we don't know. Mm-hmm. Wolverine's not.
No.
Like Banshee is not. Sunfire is not for sure.
Thunderbird is not.
No, Thunderbird clearly is not. So it gives it a different appeal. And I think too, they mentioned, they were going for a team from around the world, right? As opposed to, teenagers from the Northeast, which is really what, and Angel.
And England.
And I think, when they try things later too, right? Like, I wouldn't say the New Mutants was like the biggest success ever.
Yeah.
But at least Claremont tried to have the teenagers be from all over the U.S., right? Mm-hmm. Like, he didn't try to have them all just be from one, location.
Yeah.
I mean, Cannonball is cheesy, but...
You get different stuff from different places. It's fine.
Yeah. At least get that. Yeah. I always like Cannonball. Anyway, I'm an apologist for... But anyway, whatever. I'm not going to get into that. Everybody hates that character except for me, so...
Oh, hey. We can delve into it another time, and we can have that discussion.
Everybody hates that character. I don't know, but anyway,
you might find yourself surprised.
There are 5 billion X-Men. So I'd ask you this question then too. The follow up to this is, what happened? Like, why isn't X-Men the most popular book now? Like, what went wrong?
Oversaturation. Too many X-Men. I mean, I honestly, you have too many teams to choose from, too many X-Men books, X books, and everything else, and you've got too many different things that go and make you go, wow, okay, that's a lot to choose from, and you can't just put your finger down and go, okay, this is the storyline I'm reading, and then you got so many starts and finishes. And for the average person that's trying to find a story to where do I start? How do I do this? And that's it makes it very difficult, right? Like anybody that's jumping into this, unless you're just going, okay, I'm going to start here, or have somebody that just says, here's a good run to start with. You just pick these 3 books up, or pick this giant size number 1 up and start here. You don't need to read number 1 all the way through, or you don't need to do this or this, or here's my favorite, this is my one favorite issue, just check this out and do that, because but that's the problem, is there's so many different things that people get lost in, or they hear that, oh, you're gonna love X-Men, but this is terrible because, and you get people's opinions about things like Scott Summers or the Hellfire Club, aspects of the Hellfire Club, or
or Grant Morrison destroying the X-Men,
or whatever, and then it's like, well, I don't want to put that too much energy into it. Then if that's like a huge thing, what, Dazzler's only in there for like a hot minute? Well, what's the point then?
But those roller skates stuck around for years.
I know, but
actually they didn't. But that's
you got a character that's in there has what, two appearances, but is talked about for 4 decades.
Well, and I think too, I think you nailed it, right? That's when I quit reading the X-Men, when I had like a year's worth of X books sitting in my room that I hadn't read.
Yeah. And
trying to collect the different books. And I held out on X Factor back when it was the detective agency. Yeah. I held out on those books. And I was kind of dwindling at Marvel at the time. Bendis killed my interest in Avengers. Uh-huh. And there was just too many X books, like you were saying, to keep track of everything. And, I'm a hypocrite. I mean, I'm still grab, 5 Superman books a month, right? Try to read them all. But I'm behind on those too. I think it sort of vacillates between, and I'll go back and forth, how much of what can I read? And then it just came down to, like, was it interesting storytelling anymore? And I felt like some of the storytelling had gotten really repetitive too, or they were trying to, like, bring back a storyline. And of course, in recent years they did, right? Like Marvel, I'm not reading Marvel right now, so I cannot tell you how good the recreation of the storyline was, but they just recreated like 3 of the major 90s storylines, right? And brought them back.
Yeah.
And so why would I, and I know it's not written for me then, so why would I buy that again?
Yeah.
Like the Onslaught storyline wasn't good the first time.
And
so why would I buy it again?
There's multiple storylines that are resurrected. There's multiple storylines that it's like you got Wolverine books, tie-in books that are like the Logan book. You've got other things, and it's like you're constantly reading all these different things, and it's like that's where it gets confusing.
One is Disney-fied now. All Disney does is bring back nostalgia, right? So that's what they did. They just kept bringing back the old storylines, right?
Yeah.
And there you go. It's like
bringing back those double books with the Ghost Rider and the Wolverine. Flip it over. You got one book on one side, one book on the other. I love those. Come on, Disney, do that.
And so,
it's just like, shut up, Greg.
It's not shut up, Greg. It's just like, I think, but I mean, why not? Like, we know they're not going to bring that back, first off.
They're not.
Second, I think you hit it. It makes me sort of sad, right? Like, X-Men was so cool to me. Like, I loved reading it. But then I just fell off, to your point, because it just got to be too much, right? And, maybe that's just the nature of success, right? When you get success, you're gonna have a billion.
Oh, you end up with
it, right?
You got different versions of it, but then you have all like I said, different team tie-in books, because you're not. Marvel's really good about that in the 80s and 90s, where you've got multiple book series that all tie in or interlaced with your X-Force, your X-Men, your different X-Team books, and then your Alpha Flights, your Wolf Packs. Although they're all different, they all did have very intricate things that tied in with characters that popped back and forth. Your Deadpool tied a lot of things together.
Well, and it did come to a point too in the late 80s, early 90s. You had to buy all of the X books to get the crossover storylines, right?
Yeah.
And so it burned people out. Well, and I was just some exclusive news right now, as of 5 hours ago, Steve Yeun is not going to play Sentry in the Thunderbolts movie. And my thought was not like that was terrible. My thought was like he dodged a bullet when it's a terrible character. And 2, it's like, why are they doing a Thunderbolts movie?
My question is, why haven't they already done a Thunderbolts movie? Or TV show?
Well, they haven't, because the way they wrote those characters in the movies doesn't lead to the creation of the Thunderbolts.
Yeah, well, it doesn't, not in the movies, but why haven't they done it in the past already?
Well, because in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they haven't set up the world where you would need the Thunderbolts, right? Like, you would have had to do that after Civil War, right? Or before. No, they did it before Civil War in the comics. But
before in the comics.
Saying, well, it doesn't matter what the comics do, right? I'm saying in the cinematic universe, it would have made sense for that vacuum to be there after Civil War, that you would need a new hero team for people to respect, and boom, the Thunderbolts would be there, right? So the villains would portray themselves as heroes, right?
Yeah, because the heroes are often hiding because or they're broken. Yeah.
Right. So that would have been a perfect spot for that.
But no.
And so anyway, like, if you're thinking about, so you ask why they didn't do it. Well, it didn't this fit. Now they're doing it because they have to do everything. But I don't want to critique Thunderbolts before I see it, because I try. Listeners may not believe this as much as I critique things, but I try not to read anything about anything until I watch it.
It's true. He doesn't. And then he'll sit there and make faces at it while he's watching it. And Juju's or Paul will make videos of it and post it on his secret TikTok account. It's hilarious.
That's only if I don't like it. A lot of times I just like it, and then there's no reason to make faces of it. But when you put out a piece of crap like the Blue Beetle movie or the recent Batman movie, yeah, I'm going to make faces at it. Like, it's when you take, like especially movie. Blue Beetle, when you take a character I freaking love and you make a terrible movie, right? Like, I will make faces. Like, that's,
I haven't watched it yet, but I will.
Don't bother. Like, it's,
I'm gonna.
No, I would tell you that don't bother.
I'm gonna.
It's anyway. So we're off onto a tangent. I'm going to pause this. So maybe we should do a live watch through of Blue Beetle, and I can cry the entire time.
Sure.
But it's
listeners, you tell us what you want. If you want Dan to cry the whole time we watched the Blue Beetle, tell us and let us know.
It's just so awful.
I mean, I like the books, and I'm pretty sure it does not hold anything to.
I love the books. The movie is not, and this is not me saying the movie isn't the books. Did I say this on the podcast before?
No,
he's not Mexican American in the movie.
He's just it's a different movie. It's a different
universe. They moved him to Miami. The whole book is based in El Paso. That was its whole appeal.
It's not even in Texas? Well, I'm out.
No.
There's no mystical thing off a bridge?
No.
In the river?
Just don't. Yeah, it's just I mean, you want to talk about it. It is a completely different universe. That is for damn sure.
Tell us, people, what do you want?
It is a completely different Jaime.
I like Miami.
That's fine. But anyway, we have diverged. I'm going to end the podcast because we have now diverged from the talking of the X-Men. But I think the point stands, though. I mean, we can tie the Blue Beetle commentary back in, right? Like, as in Blue Beetle's unique because I don't think it's a character that anybody cared about. And so they really could have made a cool movie, right? Because they had some people care about the character, but they had the opportunity to make something amazing and didn't. So let's pause that for another day. But I think it's the oversaturation, or even like in the X universe, right? The death of the X universe was the massive expansion of the books, lowering of writing quality and artistic quality, and making you tie everything together and just pushing things out there. And this is where we can tie the Blue Beetle movie back in, right? I mean, this is DC pushing movies out just for the sake of pushing movies out, right?
Right.
And not necessarily making a quality movie or, thinking about like how to market that movie to an audience. And I think Marvel is on the same path, right? The original MCU was that, but now they just have to keep making things. And that's where we're talking about the Thunderbolts. They're just going to have to keep making things. And here's one I did watch. I watched the first episode of the second season of What If, because I love What Ifs, right? Like, I love those stories. And it was freaking Nebula.
No?
It was like, what if Nebula had joined the Nova Corps? I don't care. That's just not a what if I care about at all, ever. Like, let's get a D-list character and do a what if episode about them.
Well,
and there you go. Like, if you want to kill interest in the thing, you've now expanded the universe so much that you've got Nebula in your first episode of What If. That's your lead. You're leading with Nebula. What if Nebula was in the Nova Corps? Oh, yay.
Yay. Dan is not happy.
It's just, I'm not a marketing genius, but if I was marketing to that. So anyway, I need to end the rant, but I asked you about X-Men and we got, what happened to them. And let's end on a positive note.
Yes.
So first off, I don't know why I'm sharing this because we weren't covering Chris Claremont, but Chris Claremont did write one comic where the Legion appeared.
Oh, cool.
He did a Sovereign 7 plus Legion crossover in 1997. I do like to tie it back around because, we do have, obviously Len Wein interacted too as an editor, and writer. So we do have the crossover between the Legion and the X-Men, which I always think is cool to kind of wrap with, right?
Yeah.
Put a wrapper around. And So there is at least that sort of crossover. Always fun historical facts. I think that, if you read the X-Men from 1975 to what would you say, like 88, 89?
Yeah.
You're really going to enjoy yourself.
Okay.
Is that a fair statement?
That's fair. Yeah, that's fair.
I think with the it starts to go downhill in the 90s, right?
Yeah.
We read it all. We were still running down to the shop to get it.
Yeah, but I would say like at that, like once you start getting into the later, into the 90s, later 90s, a lot of that's when it starts crisscrossing, and no pun intended. But
you get the Grant Morrison run too.
Yeah, but that's when it gets really, really hard to keep up.
Well, and they bring Grant Morrison in to try to revitalize it, right? And I just don't think it worked. I mean, some people really liked it, right? They're like, oh, this is edgy, this is new, this is getting us into the 2000s. And maybe my brain couldn't handle the transition out of the Bronze and Modern Age to that, right? Like, I was like, meh, wasn't for me. And that's fine. So, sometimes things just aren't for you, right?
Yeah.
And there were some of the 90s books I really liked. I really loved, I'm totally blanking on it, with blank Exiles.
Okay, yeah.
Exiles was a fantastic book.
Mm.
And I thought the reason I liked Exiles, right, is because it was a new X-Men concept, but it didn't have to be tied to the other X-Men books. So it's just them hopping around the different universes, right? And that was cool. And I didn't have to read 1,700 other X books to enjoy that book.
Makes sense.
And I think that's one of the reasons I really loved it. So I think that kind of back into your point. But yeah, I mean, we'll read some more X-Men. I hesitate to read more X-Men because it'll just be a conversation like this. We're going to talk for 2 hours about one book, but not really talk about the book because, I mean, it's freaking X-Men.
That's what we've been doing.
But we can do it. I mean, maybe we should go back and read X-Men #1 from 1992, whatever, and look at the quality of it. I mean, the art's beautiful, but
not bad idea.
There's lots of butts and boobs. Jim Lee knew how to draw those. Yeah, draw true. Those. He great.
That's what he drew a lot of.
But the story is shit.
Yeah, we could.
And I loved it at the time, but I can't. You go back and read it, and I was like, why? I don't know. Was it just because it was exciting? We got to run to the comic shop and get it.
I think it was the new thing, and everyone that we knew at the time that was into it, that's what everyone was talking about. So it was like, oh, okay, it's like when a TV show is popular and you're talking about it, but it's like the one thing that you and your friends, like our 6 people that we talked with about this stuff.
But we talked about this before the podcast last time when our mutual friend gave me, I won't say her name on the air because I don't know her currently, but gave me her 80s X-Men books, and I went back and read them all in order. I was way more into that than I was the stuff that they were releasing right then.
Right.
And I read that and I'm like, oh my God, this is really good. And some people say that stuff is not good. Like I read the Siege Perilous stuff and they're like, that's terrible. I'm like,
true. But I mean,
I can see why.
But at the same time too, I mean, we're on a debate team, competitive forensic speaking, for high school, and so when we would travel and go to other schools, yes, we were nerds. So when we go to other high schools and talk to people, if we didn't want to sit there and talk about the things that we're there to compete about, and it came down to like other current topics, and it's like TV shows that we don't like or a comic book that we just read, we're going to talk about the comic book we just read, and finding getting that new comic book and being able to talk about that is like, it's like having a lottery ticket.
Or we're going to go to the Spider's Web in Puyallup, Washington, and meet Todd McFarlane and find out what he was doing. So but I mean it does make sense. But overall, I think this is one you say you read it every year. This is one everyone should go back and read.
Yeah.
I need to stop talking about it, but go read it. You need to read it. It's a great way to see how a superhero team is introduced. It's formulaic in the way that it happens, and it's still great. It's one of those where I can watch the episode of Law and Order and like the next week because I know the formula and it's fine. And I know the formula of how super teams are put together, and I can still read this one and be like, okay, yeah, cool. And they did it good.
That's exactly why I read it, because it's formulaic, and building a team building. And if you've read anything that I write, it's a lot of team books. How do teams fall together? How do they come together? And how do you build them? And although they're all differently built teams and stuff like that, this is a great way to understand that. And
they're not superhero teams.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I think the point is Greg's using the superhero team formula to build teams of people, right? You don't have to. It doesn't have to be superheroes, right? Like you can still take and learn from the books. Mm-hmm. And okay, I almost want to save this for later, but I want to I'm going to hang this comment and maybe we'll come back to it at another time.
All right.
But it's almost like I've heard people say, well, you don't really need to read comics to know how to write them.
No, you do.
That's baffling. Yeah. Like that's like saying, we were taught, Paul and I, the Jiu-Jitsu lawyer, were talking about War and Peace. Uh-huh. And I've never read War and Peace, and he tried to listen to it, and apparently the narrator you can't listen to in double speed because he has an English accent. So Paul got frustrated because it's a really long book, right?
Yeah.
And, I've been told, I guess, War and Peace is supposed to be like the greatest piece of fiction ever written, right? Or something like that. And the description is like these rich families during the Napoleonic era, like blah, 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 and it's a billion pages long. I don't know. Do I need to go back and read that? I don't know. I think I'd rather just read a comic book and get the basics of storytelling there.
So, I mean, you could go and watch Shameless.
There we go. I love Shameless.
I'm just joking.
I love Shameless. So there we go.
There's your workaround.
Yeah, there is the workaround. All right. Well, anyway, I'm just hanging that out there. But I would say, so I'm a bit of a hypocrite there, but I would say I'm a comic historian. So like go back and read some comics, look at some different things and see how it works for you. And if it doesn't work, that's cool too. And come back and tell us, hey, it doesn't work because of the two panels where Cyclops is interacting with Thunderbird, and I can barely look at those now because I think they were inappropriate then too. So. Mm-hmm.
There you go.
And maybe it doesn't work for you. So I don't know. All right. Well, let's wrap this one up. This is a weird one, but we did circle back into some interesting stuff with the book. So cool. And we'll wipe this puppy out and say goodbye to it. So say goodbye to the podcast, Greg.
Bye, podcast.
Buy Greg's book, Absolute Zeros. Camp Launchpad, where you will receive an MXPX CD with every hardbook copy of the book you buy. And that's it. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.